We are going to get started. Good morning, everybody. So all we're going to do today is we're going to break down the basics of what you're going to run into at the beginning of any yoga class. So I know the people I have here live are more familiar with some of this stuff. So we'll see if we can still get into some nitty-gritty so you get some value out of this. And if you're watching this later, know that you can pause at any time, rewind, watch stuff, all that good stuff. So to start with, most classes are going to start in a child's pose. So that's where we're going to start. So in a child's pose, you're going to take your toes together and you take your knees as wide as feels good in your body. So for some people, having their knees really close feels better for them and lets them get a little bit more length through their spine. But for most of us, taking your knees really wide is going to allow you to start to open up that hip complex that for most of us is really tight because we sit throughout our day. Arms are going to reach long in front of you. Knowing at any point you can also take your arms down by your sides if you find that it's a little too much stretch.
Over. They can't hear me.
Okay. Thanks for that.
But taking those arms long in front of you, let your forehead rest onto the mat. And we use these few moments to just start to show up for our practice. What does that mean? Showing up for our practice. All that means is setting aside all of your distractions. Most of us throughout our day have 8 million things going on. Our brains are running 90 to nothing. And it's hard to get present here and to set aside anything else that's going on in your day. So we take this time to just get present here and to start to establish some breath. And so what I mean by that is getting intentional about our breath. You breathe all day long, obviously. But that breath is usually something that is very unconscious. It's something that's just happening autonomically. So as we come into this child's pose, we use this time to see if that breath can get a little deeper and a little bigger. Big inhale, big exhale. Now the option at this point to start to build what's called Ujjayi Breath. Ujjayi Breath. You seal your lips and begin to breathe in and out just through your nose. Sometimes that's not possible. You've got a cold, not going to work so well. But as long as you're able to, starting to breathe just through the nose. And then we add on one more little piece. You start to tighten across the back of your throat. So you're tensing your throat as if you were going to whisper or say the letter H. And that breath is going to start to get noisy. So it's going to make a sound both on the inhale and on the exhale. It sounds a lot like Darth Vader. You get that. I'm exaggerating, but you get the idea. It also is going to sound a little bit like an ocean wave, maybe. And there actually is a purpose to this kind of breathing. A, if you can't hear your breath, you know you've stopped breathing intentionally, and it's a reminder to drop back and come back into breathing. B, it warms you from the inside out, and it's a very calming breath. So it's one that both brings your heart rate up a little bit, so it's going to intensify your practice some, but it's also very mentally calming, so it provides two purposes for us. One more nice big breath here in your child's pose. Normally in a practice at this point, we would move into a downward facing dog, which I'll let Mike demonstrate for a moment. I'm just gonna curl your toes, press your hips up and back. And we're gonna come back and break down down dog in just a minute. First, we're gonna break down mountain pose. So Mike, you come all the way to standing, and for this one, turn to face the camera. So the reason we're going to start with mountain pose is that mountain pose, everything that we're about to build right here from a standing position, applies to every single pose you do in yoga. It also applies, quite frankly, to anything you would do if you were lifting weights. It applies to just being able to stand strong and powerful. If you're having to give a speech, being able to be strongly grounded into your feet gives you the presence that you're going to want because you're not going to be fidgeting, all that kind of stuff. So it's just sort of universally applicable. So first things first, we start from the ground up. You want to aim your feet directly towards the top of your mat so that they aren't rotating out or rotating in. They're nice and parallel. From here, lift all 10 toes off the mat, spread them out. You'll feel that big mound behind your big toe start to drive into your mat. Shift a little weight now into the mound behind your baby toe. So you still have pressure through both. You can let your toes drop at this point. And then also grounding down across the band of your heel. So we call this having a point of contact. All 4 points of your feet are connected to the mat. So you're not rolling in on your arches. You're not rolling out. Everything is grounded and set. Keeping that there, you start to lengthen up through the legs. The idea here is that you're squeezing in and lengthening up. So not squeezing in so much that it becomes impossible to maintain, but being steady and strong in your legs. So you've got this really rock solid foundation. Next, you're going to draw the pit of your belly in and up. You might turn to the side. So what I mean by that is sometimes when we think about lengthening up, we just kind of think about sucking in. I want you to picture like there's a hook grabbing right into your belly button and then hooking up. And so you'll see everything in his alignment kind of goes straight up, lengthens through there. Once you have your core engaged, you're going to draw your shoulders back and down. So your chest is open, not rounding forward, not released, but really open and present. Last piece, you're going to set what's called a drishti. All that word means is focus. So you just find something that you can stare at. All that means is that you're really intentional with your gaze rather than looking all around the room. Obviously, if you're watching a video, you're going to have to break off and look at the screen from time to time. But the idea is to keep a steady focus. And then lastly, just bring your hands to heart center. Having a connection palm to palm, feeling a little bit of pressure there. Nice. So this is the first piece of our mountain pose. On an inhale, sweep your arms up to the ceiling. Arms can come down and up or just reach straight up, whatever you want. Everything else still applies exactly the same. Feet, legs, core, shoulders, but now the arms are reaching up and getting energized. From here, you can even have a little hint of a back bend right at the very top of your pose, taking your gaze up, if that's something that feels good to you. Forward fold. With control, bow forward. Now, as you get into this forward fold, you're going to want to soften your knees just a little bit because we don't want to aggravate the hamstrings. So we want a little gentle bend in the knees so that you aren't getting anything aggravated. Letting the head release and hang down towards the mat and lengthen through the back. Next, we'll move into a halfway lift. So for a halfway lift, the idea here is you want a nice straight spine from the top of your head to your tailbone. Hands could be on shins or thighs. Most of us can't plant our hands on the mat and get the length through our spine. So most of us need to bring contact into shins or thighs, but you do want contact here because that contact keeps the backs of your legs from freaking out. If you're moving as slowly as Mike is right now, you're probably wondering why we're staying in these poses so long. They're intense. Even a simple pose like this can get intense. Now you're gonna plant your hands and step into a high plank. As we're gonna start to really break things down. Feel free to drop out at any point to stop, to look, to see what's happening. So in your high plank, you want shoulders right over elbows, right over wrists. So you've got this nice vertical stack. You want your fingers spread out really, really wide. So not cupping, but nice and spread so you've got a good connection there. And then you want to be lifting a little bit through the hips. So if you would, show me sagging. So you'll see this a lot when people start to drop down. Instead, lifting up a little, not full down dog. There you go, nice. Active flexion through the feet. And again, that idea that we talked about in mountain of hugging in through the legs, so you've got engagement through the legs. Nice, everybody relax. Drop out of that for a minute. You too, Mike. Everybody gets to relax for a second. So that high plank, you're gonna wanna come to that pretty often. Out of the high plank, we have the option to go into a chaturanga, which is a low push-up. So I'm gonna give you guys a bajillion options of how to deal with a chaturanga. First variation. If you've got wrist issues, started to say shoulder issues, but if you've got wrist issues, using 2 blocks, my cats are having a fight in the background, apologies for that. If you've got problems with your wrist, nice soft blocks, so not hard cork ones, not wooden ones, but soft blocks. Placing your hands on those is gonna give you a little bit of support. It's gonna take some of the pressure off of your wrist and allow you to work through this stuff without quite as much pain. So that's an option for that. You can do high plank, you can do downward facing dog, either of these you can do with these blocks. So knowing that's an option. I don't really need to demonstrate that, but if you want to, Mike. Just coming into a high plank there. So everything else is still the same. All the principles still apply. It just helps him take some pressure out of his wrists. From downward facing dog, go ahead and keep your hands on the blocks. Instead of a chaturanga, you could just press back to downward facing dog. Anytime you hear someone say chaturanga flow, that is totally valid, 100% legitimate. You don't need push-ups, press to down dog, move on, it's absolutely fine. Coming back to your high plank, you can set those blocks aside if you'd like. We're gonna take chaturanga at level 1. People don't like to do this. People think that they're cheating and they're dropping down. This is a fantastic way to build strength. Don't be afraid to use this. So to do this, you're gonna lower your knees to the mat, but I want you to think about that action coming from your lower core. So now back up to a high plank. Show me just dropping. So this puts weight on your knees and it means nothing else in his body is working or engaged. It does you no good. Instead, from high plank, it's going to engage from his core, hug his knees in until they just barely touch the mat. So there's not a lot of pressure on the knees and your core is fired up and engaged. Now you're going to start to bend your elbows and just lower halfway down. Perfect. And coming right back up. So that right there, you can relax for a minute. That right there is our first variation of Chaturanga. If the next place we go to feels at all too challenging or too tiring, if as your practice goes on, you start to feel yourself getting a little sloppy, come back to that. Knees down is fantastic. Next to last variation, high plank. Everything else is going to stay the same. His lower core is still engaged, it's still lifting in and up. He's just not letting the knees bend, and he's going to lower halfway down, little Chaturanga. Notice that he is not breaking the plane here. He is not going below his elbows, and his elbows are hugging in. Come back up and relax. So in a lot of push-ups, we'll go this way where our elbows flare out. Totally fine in a normal push-up. In a Chaturanga, I want you to rotate your hands so that your pointer finger is towards the top of your mat. And as you lower down, elbows are going to go straight back. They may even brush the sides of your body. That's absolutely okay. And again, stopping right at that halfway point, not going further, so we're not putting excess strain on the shoulders because we move through this pose a lot. All right, last variation. So if you're like, I can do that all day long, this is super easy, I need something a whole lot harder, please do not jump to this one super quick. Pun kind of intended, which will make sense in a second, but you can also jump back to Chaturanga. If you do, you have to land with soft elbows. I see this all the time. People are like, I want to be able to ramp things up, and they shoot back to a Chaturanga and they land with straight elbows. So I want you to picture jumping off of something and landing with straight legs. You would never do that. It would hurt. You would hate it. It's the exact same thing here. You're still landing with weight on your elbows, so you want to land soft. You want to demonstrate that, Mikey. So from the top of his mat, he would forward fold. He'd get his halfway lift. We always take that before we go into high plank. And then he'd plant his hands and do a little shoot back, landing with soft elbows, knowing that that's a place that you could go. Awesome. From there, he's going to come to upward facing dog, and we're about to break down upward facing dog. So to break down upward facing dog, start on your belly. We're going to link all this stuff up in a minute, but first I want to look at each pose individually. So first we're going to look at Cobra, so that you know the difference. So for Cobra, go ahead and relax first. Okay. So Cobra, you're thinking like a snake. Legs are super, super engaged. They're pressing into the mat. The feet are active and working. Legs are active and working, squeezing towards one another. Pressing down from the hip bones all the way down to the tops of your feet. Plant your hands on your mat, kind of wherever they're comfortable. The traditional knowledge or cue is that your thumb is next to your lower rib. See how that works for you. You may want to shift things around a little bit. And then you're lengthening your spine so far forward that it starts to arc up off the mat. So it's just a little baby lift. It doesn't come very high. Absolutely okay. If you happen to have a super limber back, you're going to come a lot higher. I can demonstrate that in a second. I have that. So if you see that, you know kind of what that's going to look like. But this is our Cobra. Everything is engaged from the hips down. Up dog just goes a little bit further. So your hips and maybe even thighs are going to start to come off the mat in an upward facing dog. So you're lengthening the arms and coming up. Shoulders dropping away from the ears. Nice, relax. Let me get you out of the way for 1 second. I'm going to show something. This is the fun of workshops. There's a whole lot of moving around. So if you happen to have a super limber back, your Cobra may be all the way up here. But my thighs and hips are still on the mat. My upward facing dog isn't a whole lot bigger visually, but I'm a lot more engaged. So another thing I'm going to see a whole lot that I want you to pay attention to is an upward facing dog. As people get tired, they're here. This does not feel good. This is not good for you. Really press down and drop those shoulders away from your ears rather than sagging in. Eventually, this is going to start to cause you shoulder problems. It's not going to feel so good. So really drawing shoulders away from the ears. That was upward facing dog. We're going to come back to all of these in just a second, I promise. Mikey, you come back to upward facing dog. We're going to break down getting to downward facing dog. So I'm going to again show you a couple of variations. Upward facing dog. One way to get to downward facing dog is to press back to all fours, so keeping your knees on the mat. Yep, and now curls toes under and takes hips up and back. One way to transition. Other way to transition, upward facing dog. He's just going to skip that coming to his knees. So he's going to curl his toes under, press it up and back. You may have to flip one foot and then the other. Absolutely okay. Not a problem. Pressing up and back. Downward facing dog. Last pose we're gonna break down, and then we're gonna start to hook some things together and make a sequence out of this. The goal of downward facing dog is not your hamstrings. I know you might feel it right now in your hamstrings and calves. The goal is your spine. This is what we're interested in. So the idea here is we want length through your spine. So to get to that, you may have to bend your knees. You may have to bend your knees a lot. So put a soft bend in your knees, and as he presses back more, he gets more and more length through his spine. So if his focus is only on the legs and trying to get heels on the mat, this is gonna start to round. And I'm actually gonna show that just because you always did as well. So I don't think you can show me what it looks like poorly, so get out of the way for a second. Anyone who's been doing it a long time, it takes a while to go back to doing something with poor form. So in downward facing dog, you'll see this a whole lot. This like rounding forward and a lot of weight forward. So if your weight is forward, that's gonna kill your wrists. It's going to wear you out. So again, we're wanting to get as straight as possible through this wrist and focusing on length through the spine. So if you're starting out and you're way forward, I want you to really think about pushing those hips back. And again, knees can be as bent as they need to be. When you find length through your spine, I want you to draw your pit of your belly in and up, keep that core engaged, and then start to lengthen the legs and see where they go. I have flexible legs. My heels almost reach the mat. It doesn't matter if they're up here or down here. The goal is just that length through the spine. We're keeping the engagement through the belly button. So that's downward facing dog. Now we're gonna put all that together. In a normal class, all of these poses link and they create what's called a Sun Salutation A. And we'll use this at the beginning of just about any yoga class you take. It's a great way to warm up before doing anything else because it's a full body movement and it gets everything going. So now we're gonna see what that looks like all together. Do me a favor and start in child's pose. So if you were back at the start of your class, where we began, you were in that lovely little child's pose, getting your breath, getting established. Big breath in, full breath out. Curl your toes under, press your hips up and back, downward facing dog. It's a little moment to settle in there. We'll move nice and slow through this. You're gonna tiptoe to the top of your mat. Show that first round, just walking to the top of your mat. As you get there, now you're in a forward fold, whether you mean to be or not. You're gonna halfway lift and lengthen that spine so you get rid of the rounding of the spine that you took while you walked forward. Forward fold again. Stand all the way up, mountain. Sweep all the way up, reach towards the ceiling. Ground down through your feet as you reach up. On an exhale, you'll forward fold. On an inhale, you'll halfway lift and lengthen your spine. From here, you're gonna find your Chaturanga. You'll plant your hands and step back to high plank. Lower halfway down, Chaturanga. Upward facing dog, or Cobra, whatever you need. Downward facing dog. We're gonna take that one more time. Another way you could take this, instead of tiptoeing to the top of your mat, you could bend your knees, take your gaze forward, and jump to the top of your mat. From there, halfway lift, lengthen the spine. Forward fold. Stand all the way up, mountain. Forward fold. Halfway lift, lengthen the spine. Chaturanga flow. Know that I said that differently. What that means is you're either stepping back and doing exactly what we just did, the Chaturanga, the up dog, the down dog, or at any point in time from that forward fold, someone says Chaturanga flow and your shoulders are killing you, you halfway lift, you plant your hands, you get your high plank to get your core, and you just take it up and back, downward facing dog. We always want to respect wherever we are in our practice. All right, little pause. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself, ask questions, let me know how you're feeling, what's going on, and before we start to go into a Sun Salutation B. Anybody got anything? Looks like we're good. All right, awesome. All right, so normally we would do that about 5 times. We're only gonna do it the 2 times today because we're gonna do a lot of other stuff slow and achingly slow. But I do wanna hit on one thing. While I was cueing that, I was talking about breath. I was saying inhale here, exhale here. And students are always wondering, how the hell do I know when I'm supposed to breathe where? The basic rule is every time you inhale, you're expanding the body. Because think what's happening in your chest as you breathe. So as you breathe, your stomach is filling with air, that's expanding, your chest is expanding. So we're making space in the body. So anytime you're inhaling, it's things reaching out. So it's a mountain. It's that half lift to lengthen the spine. It's an upward facing dog opening through the chest. Every time you exhale, it's a contraction. Because as we exhale, we're drawing the pit of the belly in, ribs are drawing down.
So it's more of a class on
Feeling of hugging in.
Yoga class right now, which is really wonderful.
That's what I need.
I found out that I'm doing downward dog the wrong way the entire time because
Okay, so we're good. I thought we had a question, but no.
I love
Sorry about that. So with that
Yeah,
exhale,
there
you're
you
hugging in. So that exhale could be things like your
this is
chaturanga.
just going to the basics
Bending
of
your
it too.
elbows,
Like
you're
the
lowering
salutation.
down.
I need.
It's awesome.
Real quick, I got somebody unmuted 1 second.
Yeah. And she's doing it with Mike too, so that Mike can be doing the poses and she can be moving around and pointing.
Okay, now we should be good. So again, that exhale is that lowering down. It's that kind of feeling. So anything that's contracting. So at any point where you're like, I don't know when the heck I'm supposed to breathe. First of all, don't stress about it. Breathe naturally, if nothing else. But if you're in a place where you're able to focus on your breath, inhale is expansion, exhale is contraction. So I'm going to show one more Sun A. Welcome to join in if you want to, and we're going to focus on the breath, or you can just watch whichever you need to do right now. So we'll take one more Sun A, and then we'll move on just to get that focus on breath. So again, my darling, if you would start downward facing dog, poor Mike.
Downward facing dog.
Yes, start downward facing dog. The top of your mat happens between breaths. So he's going to breathe out as he bends his knees and looks forward. Jump to the top of his mat. Inhale to half lift. Nope, 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 nope.
Shit.
Come back to down dog. It happens.
You're distracting me.
I know, that's my job as a teacher. So downward facing dog, he floats to the top of his mat. When he gets there, inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale to stand up and expand into mountain. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, he finds the halfway lift. Exhale, Chaturanga. So that could be that jumping back into the Chaturanga, or you're going to have to add an extra breath to break down in a minute. Inhale, upward facing. Exhale, downward facing dog. Awesome. Up out of the way for a second. If you are not shooting back, you need an extra breath here. Inhale, upwards. Exhale, fold. Inhale, half lift. Exhale, high plank. Extra inhale. Exhale, lower halfway down. Inhale, upwards. Exhale, downwards. Just to be aware of that. All right. You now have a Sun A. Awesome. That is like the fundamental piece of all yoga. That's huge. That's really powerful. That gives you a lot to work with. Now we're going to start to build a Sun B. So all Sun B means is it's the second sequence in a long class. A, B, that's all it is. But it starts in a different place. So rather than starting in mountain, we're going to start in a pose that I call Thunderbolt. If you've taken a lot of yoga other places, you've probably heard it called chair. My lineage uses a different name for it because if you're thinking chair, you're thinking, I'm relaxed, I'm sitting in a chair, nothing is working. This could not be further from the truth. Thunderbolt works everything. So we're going to look at this from a couple of different angles because, again, it's a really important foundational pose. So, Mike, would you come and take a chair starting to face towards the camera first one?
I do lose part of that.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'm actually going to talk about that.
Where do you want to start?
Actually, just start by standing on top of your mat facing towards the camera. So some people teach chair with feet together or Thunderbolt with feet together. I do not, and I'll explain why as we start to go into it. You're welcome to do it with feet together if it feels better to you. I find it is impossible to cheat with your feet further apart, and when I get tired, I cheat. So I try to find ways to keep myself from cheating and taking things out of the pose. So again, we're starting just like in mountain, feet facing towards the top of the mat, and everything nice and lined up with all of those principles we just built. You're gonna start to bend your knees and drive your hips back as if you were going to sit towards a chair. So you're reaching for that chair behind you. Knees are going right over your toes. So they're not knocking in, they're not knocking out. This is why I do it with feet over, or with feet apart. If your feet are together, it's very easy to let your knees knock in and not even notice that you're doing it. So this way you can't get away with that. Arms are gonna sweep up towards the ceiling. I like arms separated like this. You will see it sometimes with the arms together, with like hands together at the top of your head. I find most students draw their shoulders up and bring tension into the pose they don't need. So I always teach this with arms further apart. Neither one's right nor wrong, they're just different preferences. If you find you have a lot of tension in your shoulders, you're also just gonna cactus your arms. This draws your shoulders away from your ears, takes a lot of that tension away. We have a lot of things in our life that put tension here. Don't let yoga add to that. So either variation is fine. Arms reaching up or cactus, whatever you like. Pit of your belly has to draw in and up, so you want to keep that engaged. Nice, relax. So, because I can have tighter fitting clothes, I can show what this looks like better. So a tendency in Thunderbolt as you sit back is people start to sway back. And so they're getting this kind of thing going on. At this point, my core is not working because I've got all this released. So you want to think about drawing that pit of the belly in and up, we'll hear that a lot, or knitting your front ribs together so you're keeping a straight line through the spine. The other tendency is to start to lean way forward so you can get deeper. That doesn't do us a whole lot of good as a static pose. You might move through that occasionally, but really thinking about drawing the upper arm bones back, as if that tricep could get next to your ears. That's what we're visualizing. What that does is it starts to work right here. We all need to work right here because everything we do rounds us forward. We want to strengthen these muscles. So in that Thunderbolt, knees right over toes, sitting as deep as you can, belly in and up, upper arm bones back. As you will notice, this is not as easy as sitting in a chair. Go right back into it for me.
Facing.
Face, yeah, there you go, horizontally, either direction you want. All right, so we've got our lovely little Thunderbolt. That will be the start of our Sun B in place of our mountain pose. Awesome little Thunderbolt. Beautiful. Breathe. Give it 2 more deep breaths. Your second exhale, you're going to forward fold. Halfway lift to lengthen your spine and find your way back to downward facing dog with or without that chaturanga nonsense, whatever you need it to be. That's your upward facing dog and your downward facing dog. Nice. Next, we're going to build warrior 1. So you're going to step your right foot between your hands. Dial down the outer edge of your back foot. I'll explain that more in a minute. And then reach both arms up to the ceiling. So this is a side view of this pose. Mike is really, really, really good form, and he is shockingly limber for a guy. So if you don't look like this, it is absolutely okay. You don't have to look like a picture in a yoga magazine to do yoga. Absolutely don't. Your body's going to be different. So for some people, this leg is going to be a lot more straight, and that's okay. The goal is to try to bend as deep into this knee as you can without knee coming out past ankle. So if as you bend into this, your knee is shooting really far forward, you're more flexible than you think you are, and you need to work that front foot further forward. Back leg, if you would flip sides for me so I can show the back leg a little bit better. You can change legs if you need to, whatever you need. Okay, so this back leg, your toes are turned in. If your front of your mat right now is 12 o'clock, that would be about a 7 or 8, so back here 6 o'clock. So we've got it a little bit turned in. Back leg is straight as you can make it. So you really want it active and engaged. Everything should be working, not straining, but engaged and working. And then both sides of your rib cage are trying to turn towards the top of your mat. So what that means is this left side is trying to draw forward. You might feel a lot of stretch through the front of the left hip. That's exactly what we want to feel, so that's okay. Drawing towards the front of the room. And again, same idea in the arms here as you have in your chair pose. So arms can be reaching up, they can be cactus, whatever you need. If your arms are starting to give out at this point because you're playing along with this, you can even let your arms drop by your side for a moment. It's absolutely okay. All right, let that go. Release completely. And the last thing I want to show is I want to show it from the front. You can change legs if you would like to give your legs a little break. I know, it's really hard being a demonstrator. It kind of sucks. So a lot of practices of yoga will tell you that in Warrior 1, your heels have to be in a line with each other. I don't even know if you can get to that. Can you walk that front foot in until it's kind of lined up? It would be on that line there. Yep, that's it, perfect.
No.
Okay, so as he tries to go into this, everything is having to wrench to get into this pose. It doesn't work. Most of us have broader hips than the people yoga was designed for. So when it was developed 2,000 years ago, it was being done by 14 and 15-year-old boys. Very different physical structure than what we have today. So instead, I always encourage people to take a wide stance. So think about your front leg is coming straight out of the hip socket, and your back leg is coming straight out of the hip socket, so that everything is nice and aligned. So they're essentially shoulder distance apart, hip distance apart. It's going to give you a lot more space. And from there, that's going to allow you to find that chest rotating towards the front of the mat. You will hear people tell you to line your hips up to the front of the mat. Again, doesn't work for everybody. If you align your chest towards the front of your mat, your hips will rotate as far forward as they actually are capable of doing. And we don't want to go past what you're capable of doing. That's Warrior 1. If your legs are dying, I completely and totally understand. All right, let that go. You good?
Yep.
All right, cool. So I'm teaching you guys today an extended Sun B because it's something that I enjoy, or words not working, because it activates parts of the body that don't usually get activated that we need to activate. Most of yoga is front and back, and we don't do a lot of side to side. And most of our life is front and back. Walking is front and back. Most of our activities are, and we don't get a lot of side to side work. So I now tend to teach Sun B with a side lunge built into it for that reason. It opens up your hips in a way that we don't get to open up otherwise. So if you would take that warrior one with your right foot forward.
This one.
Not facing that way.
Oh God.
I know, I'm sorry. What we're gonna move into next is called Skandasana, also called a deep lunge. So he is going to start to rotate his chest towards the camera and then bend deep into his left leg. We're gonna come the other direction.
Okay.
Bending deep into the left leg. All right, I love this because I can show you two different variations. So Mike does this, he's pretty high up, he's not really deep. His foot is planted on the mat. His hands can be at heart center or planted on the mat, either one's fine. The idea here is to open up through the hips. I'm gonna pause and breathe for a second, and then we're gonna trade out so you can see what it looks like in a different physicality. All right, come on out of that, and I'm gonna show a different version. My body is obviously very different, so when I go into this, it looks a little different. So you're going to come up, start to drop into that left leg. I always put my hands down because I like the stability. You can do it either way. For me, my left heel is off the mat. I have short Achilles tendons. That heel is never going to get to the mat and me still get something out of this pose. If I plant it, I'm up here and I don't feel anything. Nothing is working, nothing feels stretched. I just sort of feel like I'm hanging out. So for me to get anything, I have to drop down and lift that heel, and that's okay. My knee rotates out. Again, it feels right in my body, and my foot flexes. This is how I like to do it. Putting my toes down, again, I don't feel anything. The reason I'm hitting the differences between our two poses is to emphasize that yoga poses look different in every single person's body. The goal is for you to feel something. So that foot flex is absolutely fine. Hands down is fine. Hands up is fine. Either one works. So this is called Skandasana. It should open up through the insides of your hips. It might be super intense. Like right now for me, this is really not comfortable and I don't want to stay here much longer, but it's a good pose. So from Skandasana, last thing we're gonna do in this section is you're gonna come back to the top of your mat and you're gonna find a big open twist. What that's gonna mean is you're gonna start to shift your weight into that right foot, little low shift, turn your chest back to the top of the mat, lengthen your back leg, left hand plants on the mat, nice and strong, right arm reaches up. Just a big open twist, stretching through the upper back, opening up. That's all that is. It's there for the open back, and it's there to get you back to the top of your mat. From there, you would find your way back to downward facing dog. So from that open twist, you could plant your hands and step to down dog. You could plant your hands, step back, and take your little chaturanga flow, whatever you need it to be. That is an extended Sun B. You will oftentimes see this taught as just down dog, warrior one, flow. Warrior one, flow. Nothing wrong with that. I add in that Skandasana, like I said, to get into the rotation of our hips, to give us a little bit of support, to help prevent injury, and to keep things a little bit more fluid and moving. These two sequences together are enough of a warm-up to do just about anything. Anything we do past that is like extra gravy and is awesome and great, but those two things together are a perfectly legitimate workout, quite frankly. So let's put all that together for Sun B and see how we do. So, my darling, whichever way you want to face. Side to side, not front to back, is the only thing I would ask. So we can see everything. So we're going to take this from a downward facing dog as if we had just done several Sun A's. So those end in your downward facing dog, so that's where we're going to start. From here, you're going to make your way to the top of your mat. Step, float, jump, whatever you need. Halfway lift. Forward fold. Thunderbolt. So sit nice and deep. Sweep the arms up to the ceiling. Belly in and up. Nice. Forward fold. Halfway lift to lengthen your spine. Chaturanga. Nice, I love it. Everybody's moving at their own pace. That's exactly what you should be doing. Upward facing dog to downward facing dog. Nice. Wait till I see most people in that down dog. Beautiful. All right, from your downward facing dog, when you're ready. Nice, shoulders down, good. You're gonna step your right foot forward to find your warrior one. So again, taking space on your mat, front to back and side to side, so your hips have some room to move, arms reach up, beautiful. You're gonna drop into your left leg, Skandasana. So moving into that left leg, either hands at heart center, down to the mat, whatever feels good to you. And when you're ready to move on, you're gonna move back to the top of your mat, bend into the right leg, left hand down, right hand up, big open twist, straight and strong through that back leg. Nice. Chaturanga flow when you're ready. So again, that can just be down dog, whatever you need it to be. Awesome. Left leg forward, warrior one. Nice. Dropping now into the right leg, Skandasana. Awesome. When you're ready, you come back to the top of your mat and take the open twist. Now the right hand is down, left arm is up. So you're always twisting towards that front leg. Beautiful. That's it. And then Chaturanga flow. Bring it back to downward facing dog. Awesome. Awesome. All right, drop to your knees, let that go. Hit me up with any questions you might have. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask me a question, I'll remute you afterwards. If you're like, what the hell's going on? I'm totally lost. Know that that's okay. Hopefully we have a video you can look back on. We'll see if it turns out or not. Everybody good?
Can you do the Skandasana just really slowly one time?
Yes, 100%. You good or you want me to do it? Okay. So first let's look at it without the transition real quick, and then we'll look at it with the transition.
So you do Skandasana?
Yeah, just drop into a Skandasana. So again, just so you can visually see it, he's just gonna be bent deep into one leg.
Hold on.
This is why I put my hands down. And I also tell people in this pose, you can place your hands, you can shift and move. Play with that front foot, see where it feels good. Might feel different from day to day. So that's what it looks like. Now how we're getting into it, come back into a warrior one.
Warrior one?
Yep. And now you're gonna be facing away from us to switch legs. There you go. All right, so he's gonna move super slow, like he's moving through mud. Chest and hips start to rotate towards the long edge of your mat. You start to shift into the opposite leg and come deep. We're changing our weight. And then he starts to shift back into the front leg. Right hand down, left hand up. Nice. And again, just in case it's helpful, I'll do the same thing just so you can see different bodies moving. Because sometimes you see a different person moving, it makes it land a little differently. So as I start to rotate, I'm going to straighten that front leg, come through center, and then start to bend deep into my back leg. I lift my heel and I flex my foot. Don't have to do either of those. You see what feels better to you. And then I like to stay as low as possible to come back towards the top of my mat, just because I like how it feels in my body. So I start to shift to the front of my mat, lengthen the back leg, sweep the arm up, it matches the front bent leg. Does that help some?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, cool. All right, so those two things together are the beginning of almost any class you will ever take. So you've just gotten a whole lot. And we still have like 20 minutes. So I'm gonna teach you like a couple more quick things. I'm gonna teach you one more standing pose, and then I'm gonna teach you some yummy stretchy stuff. So don't worry, I'm not gonna make you stay on your feet this whole time. So the next standing pose that we're gonna play with is going to be a Thunderbolt Twist or a chair twist, because it's great for toning your core. And it's something that you'll see a whole lot. And it's something that I see people do in a way that is potentially injurious a lot. So I want to go ahead and hit that one just so you guys have that in your toolbox. You'll see it a lot when I teach. I use it all the time. And again, the reason I like twists is we were just talking about the fact that we move forward and back all the time. So I add that Skandasana, gets you moving side to side. Your twist gets your rotational movement, which means now your spine and hips have moved in all of the different ways that they're capable of moving, which is a good thing. We want to get all of our different directions. So for Thunderbolt Twist, do me a favor, turn, oh no, stay forward for this one. So he's going to sit back, sweep his arms up and find his Thunderbolt. There's two different variations of Thunderbolt Twist. If you have tension in your lower back, if you know you are prone to low back injuries, if you have achiness in your lower back, this first variation is what you are going to take no matter what a teacher calls. This is what you will always do. You're going to take what's called an open twist. So he's just going to reach his right arm back and left arm forward. Gaze goes back to the back hand. Now if you look at it, his hips are still really square. Would you show me what happens if you let that hip open up? Yeah, knee starts to drive forward, not so good. So coming back to center, hips stay square. This is all the rotation of the upper body. So to come back through center and take it to the other side. Left arm's gonna sweep back, right arm forward, hips stay square, gaze goes back to help encourage the rotation of the upper body. Come back through center, and now turn sideways and do that one more time. Just so you can see it from the side, right arm comes back, left arm forward, again, knees stay aligned, hips stay aligned, comes back through center and takes it to the other side. and come back through center. Nice, let that go. So that variation is one, like I said, anytime you've got stuff going on in your lower back, always just stick to that. It lets go of some of the pressure on the low back, which if your lower back is healthy, it can handle the pressure that we're about to put on it, and it in fact can be a very good thing for you. But if that is a tender spot for you, if that is a delicate spot for you, we don't want to put extra strain on that, because that's the last thing we need is something that's going to push you towards an injury. So again, we're looking for weak spots, and we want to make sure we accommodate those. So it doesn't make you any less of a yogi, it's just a different way to approach your posture. So the second way we're going to take this is called a prayer twist, because your hands are going to be at heart center. I'm going to teach this to you guys in a kind of weird way, and I will explain why. So if you would, for me, turn sideways. Sit down into your thunderbolts. I think you've done this with me. So before he brings his hands to heart center, for you guys, for this one, what I want him to do instead is I want to start to reach to the front of the room till his back gets really flat and stays nice and long. Now bring your hands to heart center. Now start to twist from your core until maybe your elbow gets outside your knee. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Now come back through center and stand all the way back up into Thunderbolt. Okay.
Like constantly going right up against the other knee.
Yes. So if you're super limber, that left elbow would come to the outside of your right knee. Awesome. If your spine is not that limber, he's going to bring hands to heart center. He's going to go to the inside of the other knee. Still getting a twist. He's just not having to go so far. We don't want to wrench the spine. We want to work on rotation and twist without damaging anything. So you see what feels better to you. So if you don't mind, I'll swap out with you for a second, just because I'm not sure how to show this on somebody else. The reason I'm teaching it this way is what I see happen a lot. People are so focused on getting into their twist. They bring their hands to heart center, and all they're thinking is, elbow has to be outside my knee. So they curl forward to get that connection. This is really painful. It does not feel good. And our spines can't rotate without length. So you literally are having to put the tiniest bit of space between your vertebrae for them to begin to rotate because of how they're shaped. So if you're rounding forward, those vertebrae are crashing into each other, and that rotation doesn't feel good because it's not how our spine is designed to operate. So I like to teach it with that lengthening forward because it keeps your spine really, really long, and people are much less likely to start to get this collapsing thing going. They tend to keep the length more. So that's the reason that I teach it that way. And when you've done it enough that you feel it in your body and you know how to get into your twist, you can leave that reach forward out of it because you've already trained your body kinetically to move in the proper pathways. But I like to start with that reach forward to get that length just to reinforce that. Would you come back up and do it one more time facing forward with that twist? And he comes into his nice, lovely Thunderbolt. He starts to reach towards the front of the room to get length through his spine. Hands to heart center, begins to rotate as far as he can rotate, and his knees stay nice and level. So it's the same idea as with your open twist. You want to keep your hips even. You take a glance down, many of you will find that one of your knees has probably dropped in front of the other one. It's really common. You'll start to roll in on one foot. If so, just try to pull it back in line and lessen the degree of your twist. So keeping our lower body properly aligned is more important than the depth of the twist. So keeping the lower body as erect as possible, as lined up as possible is more important than how deep we take the twist. Nice. There you go. Awesome. How are we doing? We're doing good. All right, so there are a bajillion other poses. There's literally over 2,000 poses now in yoga. We're clearly not going to go through all of them. And next week, we're going to do a slow flow, which means we're going to put all this stuff together. You will learn more poses with not quite as much babbling from me, but you'll get to see a lot more poses, and we're going to connect things a lot more. But to end this, I do want to take a chance to get into two of our relaxing poses that we tend to take at the end of classes, because they are ones that people often have a lot of questions about. So we're going to start with a pigeon. And for pigeon, I'm going to give you, again, two options. You'll note I'm giving you guys a lot of options. That's because our bodies are all dramatically different, and the same things don't work for all of us. So I'm going to start with pigeon. If as we go into this, you're like, this hurts my knee and doesn't feel right, hang out a second. I got you. I will teach you a variation. But for pigeon, we often start this from downward facing dog, which you could also start it from all fours if you'd like, whichever feels better for you. You're going to start to draw your right shin towards the top of your mat. So what you're thinking about here is that right knee is trying to get behind your right hand, and then right ankle is trying to get behind your left wrist. So the idea, ultimately, if you have crazy open hips, which I can demonstrate because I do, is that front shin is parallel to the front of your mat. This does not work in most people's bodies. I am weird. I am super, super limber. So if you go into this and that front shin is nice and parallel, awesome, great. That would look like from the side is a straight line across. If that works for you, awesome. If it doesn't, having it bent in a little bit more is fine. What we're looking for is your hips centered so that you're not rocking onto your right hip and like your upper body kind of hanging out to the right. I don't know if you can show that. Like drop into this hip and roll open. So this isn't going to get you as much. We're trying to get centered over the legs. And I'll show this from a couple of different angles in case you're like, this doesn't make any sense to me yet. One way to work with that, actually, if you would you spin sideways? If you have super tight hips, but this is not causing you pain in your knee, you can grab a block or a pillow or anything else, and you put a little support right underneath your booty. And that's going to make you more centered, and it gives you a little bit of support. Once you get here, you can lengthen up by pressing into the mat or pressing into your front shin, get a little length through your spine, and then you just relax forward. And then you hang out here for a while. And just breathe and get things to start opening up. So if this felt really good in your body and you're like, I'm happy, I'm staying here, you just stay right there and enjoy yourself. If you're like, this still doesn't feel good to me and I need something different, we're going to show you figure 4. For figure 4, you come onto your back.
Still facing the string.
Yeah, still facing side to side. To be accessing the right hip, you would take your right ankle, put it across your left knee. So now your legs are like in a figure 4. Your arms are going to reach through. So right arm is going to reach through that gap between your leg. Left arm reaches around the outside, either grabbing the front of the shin or the back of the thigh, whatever you can comfortably reach. And then you're going to try to let your upper body relax down onto the mat. It's kind of hard. And you're going to hug in. Still getting into your hip. All right, you get out of the way for a second. We'll show one more thing. If that pigeon causes you pain in your knee, but you are limber, there's one more place you can go. So from this figure 4, I don't feel anything because my hips are really loose. I actually grab onto the leg, hug it in, and let my leg go along. So if you're super limber, this is available to you. But again, being limber doesn't make you a good yogi. In fact, it can sometimes cause problems in your body. So limberness is not anything to aspire to. All we're looking for is to get a little bit more flexible than we ourselves are in the moment to help our muscles achieve full mobility. So doing a split, wrapping your leg around your head, none of that stuff matters. You're just looking to go a little farther than you do naturally. So if you've been hanging out in pigeon this whole time, you're going to take a little pause and come out of it. As we come out of these poses, you want to move really carefully. So if this has been a really intense pose for you, you're going to kind of gently move. Don't worry about anything being fluid and graceful. You'll make your way back to down dog, however works in your body. If you got to use your hands to haul your legs somewhere, it's absolutely okay. We'll come back to either down dog, or I'm going to demonstrate it on this side from tabletop. It's the exact same idea. You're just starting to draw your shin forward. I actually have to use my hands to get set up in this pose. I have to like manipulate things to get into it. That's okay. Totally fine. And I'm just starting to bow forward. I'm going to give you guys a couple of breaths to be on the other side just so that we even you out and make sure you get a little bit of love on each side before we take our last pose. If you want to hit pigeon on the other side, open up your hips, feel free. So the common understanding for these poses, if you took yen with me last week, we held those poses for about 3 minutes. If you were taking it in a studio classroom, you'd probably hold those poses for 5 minutes. I was being nice to you guys. I want to introduce you to it and not make you run screaming from the concept of yen. So in those classes, we hold poses for a long time because we're trying to get into connective tissue, like I talked about. In a flow style class, in a more active class, we don't hold these poses for as long because your muscles are super warm and we're wanting to access the musculature, not the connective tissue. So we tend to hold these poses for at most a minute, which for most people is between 5 and 15 breaths. So on average, 5 breaths is usually about 30 seconds, 10 is about a minute, 15 is about 90 seconds, roughly. Not everyone breathes the same, obviously, but that tends to be about the average. So that's usually about how long you're going to be in these poses. And we look more at, like I really focus on trying to get your hips centered, that kind of thing. When you're in yin, we don't care. Bend a leg in, take the other leg back, fall forward, fidget till it feels like you're hitting something. Because again, yin is sloppy yoga. Like literally, that's what it's referred to as. Whereas our yang poses, we're looking more at having things aligned and really trying to access a specific area. Give another breath or two, and then you'll start to make your way out of this and come onto your back. I said last pose, I actually meant last 2 poses, but one of these is gonna be really, really quick. Almost every yoga class has an inversion in it. If you already know how to do a headstand, go you, rock on, do your headstand. I don't do headstands. I'm not going to teach shoulder stand today. We're gonna do that in our advanced basics class. So I wanna give you guys another option, and this is called waterfall. Waterfall's the best. This is my favorite pose in all of yoga. If you have a block, great. If you don't have a block, cushion, a bolster, anything, you're gonna put it underneath, oh, mic's already there. You're gonna put that block underneath your sacrum, point your legs up to the ceiling, take your arms out as wide as feels good to you, and close your eyes. You are in an inversion. It is amazing. I love this pose. It does everything for you that any other inversion would do, but it's restorative and relaxing. And to be honest, if you're really, really pushing yourself in a flow class, if you're doing all of those chaturangas as powerfully as you can, if you're doing all of those poses with your all, you're gonna be tired at the end of class. So getting into a shoulder stand can sometimes be a little risky because you don't have as much oomph to make sure that your alignment is proper to protect yourself. So I personally think this is the best thing in the world to do with the end of class. So I wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to see that. All right, coming out of that. At the end of any inversion, we always want to do a twist. It's just an energetic thing. It's your legs are over your head. We end that with a twist. So I'm going to teach the most simple variation of a twist. At its core, all a twist is, your knees go one way, upper body goes another way. But we want your spine to be aligned as you do it. So to get into a twist, he's going to lift his hips ever so slightly and shift them about 2 inches to the right, which is going to make him feel off center. Once he gets there, knees now are going to go left, and now his spine is straight again. So you have to kind of go a little off, a little cattywampus off center, and then come into your twist to keep the spine actually straight in your twist. Other arm can reach out long, and you just breathe. Voila, you are in a twist. It is fantastic. Nice. One more big breath here. You're going to come back through center, and I'm just going to demonstrate the next level of this. You're feel free to do what you just did on the other side, but if that was not enough for you and you want to amp it up, he's going to shift his hips now 2 inches left, but he's going to cross his leg. So left leg over right, then drop into his twist. All that's doing is it's intensifying the twist because the top leg now is coming closer to the mat than it would if his knees were stacked. So if you want to be able to see that on camera, if you would uncross your legs in that twist for me 1 second. So uncross your legs, drop back into the twist. This top knee is about here. And then come back up, cross your legs, come back into the twist. You can see how much lower that knee is. Here's where it was before, here's where it is now. That's a pretty big drop. So it's just a way to get a deeper twist in this same basic setup. In future classes, we'll play with different twists. When you're ready, come back out through center. If you want to, you can end class with a happy baby. It's my favorite thing to end class with. You're just grabbing your feet or the backs of your legs and you move because babies move. You literally, this pose is called happy baby because this is literally what little kids do. They grab their feet, they rock, they roll, they stretch one leg, they stretch the other, and it's actually fantastic for your hips. So always knowing that's available to you. And then we start to find Shavasana, which I'm actually going to describe today because there's a lot of different ways you can approach this. So Mike right now is in the most basic version of Shavasana. His arms and legs are wide. This feels good to him. Doesn't hurt his low back. Feels great. If he had tension in his lower back, he could plant his feet. He could also take the soles of his feet to touch and take his knees wide. Still everything feels good. If you have blocks around, a really lovely way to take this, take your legs long again. I'm just gonna put a block underneath his knees. It allows your knees to be a little softer. It gives a little bit more release to the lower back. So if you have access to something like that and you're practicing at home, it's a really nice way to take Shavasana. Also, if you are practicing at home, before you come into your practice, setting yourself up with something nearby, like a towel, so you can drape over your eyes as you go into Shavasana, is really nice. Because you block out the light, and you can allow yourself to actually just be still. And as you settle in here, you're going to let go of your breath. So stop being intentional about it. Just let it come back to normal, natural breathing. And allow yourself to be still for several moments. Come out of Shavasana, you'll take a deep breath in and sigh it out. Bring some easy movements back into your body. Give yourself a nice big stretch, fingertips to toes, and curl yourself onto one side to pause for a moment. And as you're complete, when you feel ready to move on, you just come into a comfortable, easy seat. If you're practicing by yourself, just give yourself a moment to pause here. If you're not following a video, if you're not in a class, you just take a little moment to pause. Because this moment at the end of class is actually really important. So you didn't do as much movement today as you would in a normal class. You did a lot more just kind of getting into a pose and having to hang out there or watching. It's a very different process when you're doing more of a workshop like this. But still, at the end of every practice, you've done a lot of movement. You've done a lot of things to open up your body, to change your body, and you don't always notice it. So in this last moment of coming into stillness, give yourself a moment to mentally scan your body to notice, do things feel different? Do you feel tired in areas? Do you feel more open and free in areas? Not judging any of that, just being aware of it, noticing as your body is changing and evolving, because we go through these changes all the time and don't realize what's even happening. They don't get to appreciate it. They don't get to enjoy it. And this is also a moment that is referred to in yoga as metta. And all metta means is gratitude. And so it's taking a moment to be grateful, not only to whoever might be calling out poses to you, but more importantly, to be grateful to yourself, to acknowledge that even if you struggled in your practice, even if there were things that seemed completely unattainable, you attempted them. Your body was able to get on your mat and do something. And even if it wasn't doing what you wanted it to do, what you expected it to do, it did an amazing thing. And be grateful for that. Be grateful for what you're capable of. And be grateful to yourself for being able to put in some time and energy to give yourself some self-care and some self-love. We don't acknowledge that. We're very good about looking at a friend and being like, man, you got off your mat. You did yoga for 10 minutes. You rock. And we'll tell them that. And we'll do yoga for 10 minutes and say to ourselves, damn it, I should have done an hour. I suck. It's human nature. But it's also bullshit. So take a moment to actually be proud of yourself, to acknowledge yourself the same way you would somebody else. And then we simply bow forward in gratitude. You can say namaste here if you like, which is the beauty of the light within me, sees and honors the light within you. Whatever you want to do to let it go. And that is the end of your practice. Thank you, guys. So now if you want to unmute yourself, ask me questions, hit me up with stuff. Also know that for this time period, if you want to ping me and set something up face-to-face, I'm happy to do that, to work through things. If you're like, something doesn't feel right in my body, I'm available. I'm happy to do that. This is my passion. I love this. You guys have any questions? You can also drop them on Discord if you want.
I just want to say that Sun 1 destroys my hands.
Yeah.
I still got to work on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely the blocks, but also actually for you, let me show you this. So instead of doing those chaturangas, which you don't need. So there's a couple different ways that you could approach that. You could also try them on fists, which for a round or two sometimes is okay. After that, it starts to get kind of painful on the knuckles, so I wouldn't do many of them, but it is an option. You can do down dog on your forearms instead. It's going to be harder to get into, but it's actually a hell of a workout. I actually had to do that for somebody who broke a couple of her fingers, and we did her whole flow that way. And show you what that looks like just so you have it on someplace you can see.
Awesome.
So if your wrists are like, no, because yours are, they're delicate, and it's so important for what you do with your life. You need to have that mobility. So you come from your mountain, your forward fold, and your half lift. From there, you're probably going to have to kind of compensate a little bit. So I would come to knees, because most of us aren't going to be able to fold enough to get to your forearms. Plant your forearms and come into a forearm plank. And you get a little moment there. You can get a little baby cobra by releasing your hips and opening the chest, and then coming into dolphin. So for Sun A's, that's where I would send you if I was working with you regularly, and doing it slower, because it takes longer to get into those poses, but it's going to get you the core work that you want, and it's going to get you the hip opening you want without risking your wrists. And then when we move to Sun B's, I would leave all that mess out entirely. Instead, what I would do if I were you is I would come from your Thunderbolts, and then I would pick whatever foot's supposed to be at the back of your mat up, and step back to Warrior One.
Cool. Okay.
And then move into your other stuff. You can even still get into that forward twist and then just step it forward rather than flowing. And that way you're not putting that extra pressure on your wrists, but you're still getting everything else that you need to get out of the class.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love modifications. That's honestly, that's what I did all my advanced training in was, all right, my body doesn't work this way right now. What the heck do I do? So if you guys ever have questions, that's like my favorite thing to address. So